Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. You are watching the 7th episode of Jacket Sports Weekly, and we're going to start things off with Brett Gambita for the men's football team, but don't go anywhere. You're watching JSW.
Welcome to JSW, WCTV's home for Waynesburg sports. Watch our analysts discuss fall, winter, and spring sports and cover topics such as athletes of the week, phenomenal plays, and intense games on a weekly basis. Tune in every Tuesday to hear what's going on with your favorite sports at Waynesburg University here on Jacket Sports Weekly.
Where else would you want to be on?
Where else would you rather be?
Welcome back to Jacket Sports Weekly for our first segment. We're going to be sitting down with Brett Gambita to talk about the football team. Brett, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. How are you guys doing?
Good. You mentioned something special about your shirt. I would love to hear about it.
This is the Waynesburg Wins shirt. Every time Waynesburg wins, on Monday I'm wearing this shirt on JSW.
I love it.
I didn't get to do it last week because I was interviewing the players, and I mean, honestly, I kind of forgot. Sorry. But anyways, got the Waynesburg Wins shirt is on here. So.
Well, I love it. I think it's great. And you already mentioned that you got to sit down and interview some athletes. So this first question kind of connects perfectly with that of who are some of the athletes from this phenomenal 44-41 win against Allegheny this past Saturday. Who were some of the athletes that shocked you this weekend?
Oh my gosh, there was so many. My list goes on and on. It almost scrolled for like 45 minutes, I swear. But Sam Barber, the Waynesburg Athlete of the Week and the PAC Offensive Player of the Week. He had his best game as a Yellow Jacket, and he came into this game with 2 passing TDs on the season, threw 4 in this game alone. And then one of the guys he was throwing to as well, Tyler Richmond, he really impressed me. He had his best career game as a Waynesburg Yellow Jacket, had a couple long plays, showcased his big play ability, and with Isaac Trout getting ready to graduate here soon, Richmond made a strong case at the future wide receiver 1 spot. And then Zane Colley, we know what he's capable of. He had another great game on the ground, but he also flexed his ability to catch a screen pass and take it 70 yards to the house almost. So that was pretty nice to see. And then a couple other guys real quick. Sakai Miles scored his first career touchdown. Isaiah Fields had a couple big catches. Brendan Boron forced 2 fumbles. Those were recovered by Jamil Cypress and Kevin Willis. And then Deontay Givens had a couple big plays on defense, as well as Ewing Jameson and Quilly Wooten. They each had interceptions. So I'm out of breath just talking about all these fantastic Waynesburg athletes in this Allegheny game.
Yeah. I mean, and you mentioned Barber in the beginning, and it just was anything and everything that we would have asked for from Barber, especially in the air. I mean, he had over 350 passing yards and 4 total touchdowns. It was just spectacular to see. But with this, do you think that this is now the time that Barber has cemented himself as the starting quarterback, or do we see TB3 at some point through the remainder of the season?
I think as long as Barber can continue to perform how he did last Saturday, that he will be the starter moving forward. And this is the type of game that can build confidence. So a performance like this, I think he's definitely going to be the starting quarterback for the remainder of the season here, these last 3 games.
Yeah, and speaking of those last 3 games, our next game for the Waynesburg athletes is going to be home against Grove City. And Grove City's 13th in the nation right now in all of D3 football. So it is no shock to this team that this is going to be a tough opponent. This is going to be a really hard game. So what does the team need to do throughout the week, throughout practices and things of that nature, to take the great win that they had and the great positives that they had from the Allegheny game and carry that into Grove City so that it might not be too hard of a win or could honestly contest against this really tough opponent?
I would say really try to make sure the first drive of the game is scripted as well as it possibly could be, because one of the main things they did well in the Allegheny game was they scored points early. They had back-to-back touchdown drives to begin each half, and I'm not sure that's going to be possible against Grove City, but that's definitely something you need to look out for. And another thing, you cannot turn over the ball. You can't give Grove City any freebies. Can't give them any good starting field position off turnovers. But one thing I wanted to point out is that Grove City might be overlooking Waynesburg, because they've got 2 very strong opponents coming up after Waynesburg, Case Western and Westminster. Grove City could be overlooking this game and preparing for those 2 future opponents. So this is where Waynesburg has to come in and give Grove City one heck of a game.
I would agree with that. And the biggest thing that we've seen so far is that the offense has continuously gotten better. But the thing that I've seen, at least from this Allegheny game, was that the defense did let up a good amount of points. We had a strong lead going into that fourth quarter, and then with that 10 minutes that we had right before that final 5 minutes of great offense, the defense let up some points. So what does the defense have to work on for it to be at least a success, even if it's not a win against Grove City, for a success of betterment of the team against Grove City this weekend?
Try to win the early downs. Try to get your defense off the field as soon as you possibly can. That's getting stops at the line on first and second down. Allegheny in that last game had a lot of drives that were sustained for long periods of time. So if you can just get Grove City off the field early by winning those early downs, then that's definitely something you can look forward to. But yeah, honestly, in my opinion, I think this was the worst game played by Waynesburg's defense. They were lucky, though, and forced a lot of turnovers, so they were able to get some of that back. But letting up those 3 unanswered touchdowns in the fourth quarter to Allegheny, that can't happen, and that's something that if you allow that against Grove City, I think they won't play around with it like Allegheny did. So just try to win the early downs against Grove City.
Yeah, and then looking into later in the season, towards the end of the season, we have Teal at home, and then our last game is on the road against Geneva. 2 pretty easy components. It's a easier end of the season for us than the front half of the season was really tough. But right now we currently sit 3-4. It's going to be a tough game this weekend, but it's not impossible to walk away with a win. But do you think that the team could have a 500 season?
I think it's definitely in the picture. I think the 500 season is definitely on the horizon. And looking at Teal and Geneva, 2 of the 3 final opponents there, Waynesburg led both of those games last year at different points. And against Geneva, they led into the fourth quarter, I do believe. So just make sure you don't have any slip-ups late in the game because they could come back to bite you as they did last year against Geneva and Teal. So if that doesn't happen this year, Waynesburg could be walking away with their first 500 season in quite some time.
Yeah, well, that's going to do it all for us on this football segment. But don't go anywhere because we're going to be serving it up with Ethan Spizarski for some volleyball.
You're listening to WCYJ FM 99.5 The Hive, your home for everything Waynesburg.
Our campus radio station gives students like you a chance to work in live studio environment without ever leaving Waynesburg. WCYJ FM has specialty shows, sports recaps, and updates, weather, and live coverage of your Yellow Jackets. Tune in at 99.5 The Hive or online at waynesburg.edu/listen.
Welcome back into Jacket Sports Weekly. Right now, we are joined by Ethan Spizarski for some volleyball. And with the volleyball team, they've been doing quite well. They've won their last 2 matchups. The first one against Bethany, they won that in a 3-2 contest. And then also with Westminster, they won that in a 3-2 contest. So just overall, Ethan, just kind of explain to me how this 2-win streak so far has been going on for this team and what they're going to continue to add on as they keep going in the season so far.
So, I mean, yeah, you mentioned it. 2 matches in a row. They snapped a 5-match losing streak there. They've won 6 of the last 10 sets. They're putting together long, sustaining matches with, these sets with Bethany. They gave up the first set, win the next 2, tie, win in 5, and then a bit of the opposite. They won every other set. They won the first, third, and fifth set against Westminster, excuse me. So, the big thing from that is Westminster's a very good volleyball team. To get a win there, to get your second PAC win against a very good opponent like Westminster, that's a good thing to have on your side. Just some key stats there for you over our last 2 matches. Christina Zadrosny, 28 kills in the two match time span. She won Female Athlete of the Week this week. Riley Roofley, 57 assists in that span. Paige Cowsley, she's dipping in every stat category. 12 kills, 7 assists, 24 digs. And then Jordan Stein, not shocking at all, 58 digs over the last 2 matches. The constant contributing of everyone on the team is crucial. You're seeing it now with Hope Johnson. She's been putting a different, algorithm of different girls in at different positions at different times, kind of just seeing what works best, and it's paying off here. So, the girls, they stopped the losing streak and they're adding on the win streak. Now they're building up against a team that they could very well beat in W&J here coming up next.
Yeah, and you already mentioned the Washington-Jefferson game coming up next, but how can this team continue to build off these 2 big wins? You've already mentioned that these are big wins. Bethany for years in a row has made very deep runs, and along with Westminster into the PAC playoffs, and Bethany has come out with a ring on top of that every now and then. So these are really big wins. So how can the team continue to build off of this, and what are the key takeaways against this rivalry matchup we have coming up?
I mean, the key takeaways here for Waynesburg is, I mentioned it before, kind of building off of what your success has shown in taking on a W&J team that it's only 500 overall, and they're 3-4 in the PAC. They're only one spot above you in the standings, and it's a very close matchup. There's not too much behind it. They're currently right now, they just snapped a 3-match losing streak themselves. They've only won 7 of the last 18 sets. So this W&J team, while W&J and Waynesburg are known for having rivalries in multiple sports in different categories, I think this is very much a winnable match here for the women here. It's right there. You have multiple people contributing on multiple cylinders. You have Zadrozny. She's a younger athlete, women's athlete right now, contributing to the team. You've got people like Paige Mortimer as well, who are working their way up into upperclassmanship, but she's been contributing the last 3 years. If you just keep doing what you're doing and utilizing the different rotations and people, it's going to pay off here. And I've been talking about riding the confidence high, ride the waves right into the coast here. It's very possible that Waynesburg could beat W&J here.
Yeah, and with that, if they do continue to win and continue to play at the factors they've been playing at, playoffs is one of the bigger things that we're going to be seeing here. So just explain, what needs to happen with Waynesburg, but also with the other teams within the PAC for us to get either in the playoffs or maybe even in better positions within the playoffs.
So for Waynesburg, their journey, you look at it 2-5 PAC record, because the conference record is what matters most. Overall, at this point, does not matter so much for playoffs. For PAC, Waynesburg is in 9th out of 11 teams, but they are by no means out. And I know what you're saying. Ethan, what kind of hot rocks did you consume before the production today to say that? Well, looking at the 3 teams that are tied for 6th place, you have Franciscan at 3-3, Grove City at 3-4, and W&J at 3-4. Waynesburg's 2-5. Waynesburg plays W&J and Grove City in the 2 of their next 3 matches here. Mm-hmm. They're going to have an opportunity to cut that down. So Waynesburg still can technically compete for the 6th seed spot here, but you got to win. Essentially, they have to win out. That would be the number one aspect. You got to win out, because if it comes down to ties, you lose the tie to Franciscan. You could win it. If you win, you have the W&J and or Grove City tie. But again, you got to win out. You got to continue to apply this. If they lose here, it's all but lost here, especially against W&J and Grove City. And you're already down with a tiebreaker, like I mentioned, against Franciscan. But it's kind of crazy to think. I kind of mentioned that, 9th place, and they're fighting for a 6th place spot. It could very much happen. And for Hope Johnson to have this situation in her hands as the first-year coach with the year how it started, 0-5 to start the year, that changes. This changes the game a little bit. This really gets you excited for women's volleyball on top of what they're bringing in. What she's been working to bring in, especially what they're going to be losing too. So playoffs are by no means, I would say, out of the reach here for women's volleyball.
Yeah, and you already mentioned this a little bit. You touched on it. Just after Washington and Jefferson, it's Grove City, and then the final game is St. Vincent. So what can this team do? And you already mentioned Hope Johnston, her first year as the head coach. So what can this team do for it to be an absolute successful first year under a new head coach?
Well, the obvious answer is kind of just like winning. But, that's a little too obvious, a little too vague. I think progress is what you want to see from years to years. What progress has been made? Waynesburg last year was 8-9, finished like 8-17 or something in that respect. They're not. They've had losing streaks, like I mentioned, a 5-match losing streak, but they're rebounding themselves really well here. They're utilizing their key players. They're finding different positions, like I mentioned. I think Hope Johnson's first year has been a mega success. If you ask me, if you ask the players, they love her, and it's a key thing too. You want to be like a player coach too. You don't want to just be all stats, records. If the players, the fans don't like you, that's half a problem. That's a big problem, and you want to have that. So from what I heard, the girls rally behind her. She really brings out the best in them. So far so good. I think you've got to be proud of what you've seen here. First year as a head coach. She's been coaching for a while. She's been assistant at Westminster, but first time really taking it at the helm here, and she's done an excellent job with it. So I think that's what you see is more progress, and I think we're seeing that throughout the year.
And you mentioned progress, and just for my final question is that with that progress, if the rest of the season doesn't pan out, you still have 1 to 2 matches that you could play, and you can kind of play around with what the team is going to look like next year. Senior Jordan Stein, the libero for this team, has been great in and out, but she's a senior. She's going to be leaving. So Do you, as a coach or as an analyst, want to see someone come in and out at that libero position, try and find who's going to be your replacement now, or do you wait for that in the offseason?
I'd wait for it more in the offseason. There's still spring ball to come. Right now, focusing on what they have, staying more in the present moment. They're also going to have more recruits. There's going to be more time to bring other people in and kind of scout out who you want to bring in for your team. Because, I mean, you mentioned it, nail on the head. Jordan's leaving as the libero. It's a key position out there on the court. So to lose her, it's terrible. But at the same time, you're going to have enough people. We've seen offensively, Waynesburg has the chance to bring in some good offensive firepower. You're losing Emma Hyatt. You lose Cowsley on the back line with Jordan there defensively. Those are just 3 of the 5 seniors. Offensively, Paige Mortimer, Krista Wilson, Christina Zadrozny. I mean, you have people that are still able to produce. Roofley as well. She'll be there still for another year. You have people that can come in and help build the foundation and stabilize things. So, I think more wait to answer your question, though, waiting till more of the offseason to do that. It's a key thing. Work in the spring, find out, then, in the fall when that rolls around, then you've handled that beast there.
Right.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ethan, for joining in on us for the women volleyball analysis. But don't go anywhere. We're going to be coming back with Michael McKenzie to talk about men's and women's soccer and what the playoff picture looks like for both teams.
This is so buzz.
Cornucopia.
Try instead of train.
I love this show.
Welcome back into Jacket Sports Weekly for our final segment. We're going to be talking about men's and women's soccer, and there's nobody better to do it other than Michael McKenzie. Michael, how are you today?
I'm doing great. It's always great to be up here talking about soccer. Big week coming up for both of these teams.
Oh, absolutely. We're getting into playoff week, but we're going to start off with the men's side of things. We decided we're going to go from the good to bad for this segment. So, the men's team lost to Penn State Barron 3-0. Not a conference matchup. Doesn't really matter. But they did lose to Geneva 8-0 this Saturday. Hard loss there. And on top of that loss, they lost Taylor McFarland towards the end of the first half of play to a red card. So he won't be playing on Wednesday versus Grove City, and they played a man down throughout the rest of the Geneva game. So tough loss. So with that information that the audience was just given, my first question for you, Mike, is what are the possibilities for this team to make playoffs? What are the different scenarios that have to happen for the men's team to advance into the playoffs?
Well, there's more that can go Waynesburg's way than not go their way. Let's put it that way. Laying out the scenarios here more in depth. If Waynesburg wins or draws tomorrow against Grove City, they are in. No questions asked. That's it. If Waynesburg loses to Grove City, Washington and Jefferson plays against Westminster. W&J is the only team that can take the 6th spot away from the Yellow Jackets. If Washington and Jefferson were to lose or draw, the result of Waynesburg's match against Grove City wouldn't even matter. Waynesburg would be in no matter what. Even if Washington and Jefferson draws and Waynesburg loses, they would have the same number of points in the PAC standings, but the tiebreaker is overall record. Waynesburg would have the better overall record. They were better in non-conference play than Washington and Jefferson, so Waynesburg owns the tiebreaker, which means they just have to win or draw and they're in, or if Washington and Jefferson doesn't win their match against Westminster, Waynesburg's result doesn't matter, they're still in. So there's more that can go Waynesburg's way than not, but there's still work cut out for them because Grove City, top 2 team in the conference standings, Westminster, they're currently out of the playoff picture, completely eliminated from it. So they're not going to be playing for too much in that match against Washington and Jefferson, so Waynesburg is going to more than likely have to handle their business against Grove City.
Yeah, and with that, the biggest thing that I saw, especially leading up to this game against Geneva, was that they played a non-conference game, Penn State Barron, and they lost that 3-0. And not only was it a loss, but there was a loss of a few players with some injuries that possibly could have helped them in this Geneva matchup. Is that necessary to reschedule this non-conference game? Is it necessary at all?
I see the arguments to this both ways, because the argument against it obviously is the things that happened that didn't go Waynesburg's way. You lose 3-0 against Penn State Barron. You lose a couple of players due to injury. You're now playing a little more depleted against Geneva and potentially against Grove City, and if they can get there, potentially in the postseason. But you also look at it and say you don't want to take an entire week off, just practice, nothing but conditioning, and not game-like speed, game-like work heading into your most pivotal 2 matches of the season. So using it essentially as a tune-up to stay on schedule and stay on track with what they had been doing the entire season, which was match Wednesday, match Saturday in PAC play. I think that argument for it is why they ended up playing this match. Obviously, things didn't go Waynesburg's way in more ways than one, but I can see why they ended up having the match anyways.
Yeah, and then to look forward to Wednesday, they match tomorrow against Grove City. Obviously, they're going to be down. They're going to be down McFarland. So what are the adjustments that the team needs to make in that backfield with the defending line to adjust to the loss of Taylor McFarland, unable to play because of his red card this Saturday?
I think everybody on that back line is going to need to pick up a little bit of McFarland's slack. It seemed like he was a huge communicator and a conductor back there to make sure everybody was set, everybody was in the right place. Now that he's not going to be participating in this match, you're going to need everybody on that back line to pick up a small slack of his communication, the experience, and what he was doing back there, basically being the conductor of that back line. Otherwise, Waynesburg needs to control the ball a lot more in this match and get themselves more opportunities to score. 8-0 against Geneva, 3-0 against Penn State Barron. They've got 1 goal in their last 3 matches overall, and it came in a draw. In their last 7 matches, they're 1-4-3. They're lucky, I think, to still be in a position to make the postseason, but hey, they're there. It's all about what's in front of you, and all they need to do is win or draw against Grove City. Grove City's a really good team, but if they can draw against Grove City, I think you consider that a major win, and obviously a win is huge heading into the postseason, but you got to create more offensive opportunities. The defense has been very solid in this time for Waynesburg. It's been about creating the offensive opportunities. It really hasn't been there. They have to be there.
Yeah, and the biggest thing, as you said, is that playing competitive against Grove City is one of the key things that they need to do. So with that competitive style, what do you want to see from this team after this 8-0 loss going into Grove City?
Well, to give you a coach speak answer, win. But to be the analyst that I'm up here to be, you got to generate more offense, like I just said. Generate more scoring opportunities, control the ball, control the action a lot more than they have been in their last 6-7 matches. And I think you're going to give yourselves an opportunity to come out with a draw or a win, which gets you into the playoffs.
Yeah, and then to move away from the men's side of things and into the women's side of things, the women won 5-2 against Geneva this past Saturday and secured themselves a spot in the playoffs. Joey and I were able to announce that game, and it was a phenomenal game for the women. So they're already in the playoffs. Next game, they still have 1 more regular season before the playoffs, which is also against Grove City this Wednesday. But my first question for you, Mike, is since that playoff spot is already secure, it's already there, it's already happening, do you play your starters or do you give them rest for those quarterfinals that will be coming up this Saturday?
I'd ask about the importance they think of playing either St. Vincent or Allegheny, because those are the 2 teams that hold the 3 and the 4. Currently, it seems as though those are the 2 teams that are going to be hosting the quarterfinal matches in the PAC playoffs. If they have a preference of opponent, then you do whatever you think would get you that seed. They can be the 5 or the 6. They're going to make it. I think it depends where you want to go. If they want to play at 4 seed St. Vincent, you play your starters, you win this match, and you get that opportunity against St. Vincent. If you want to go to Allegheny, maybe you give some of the bench players a little bit of experience. Maybe you give your starters some rest. We just talked about the Penn State Barron match for the men. You wanted to keep that consistent schedule, also almost muscle memory, playing on Wednesday and playing on Saturday. But if you want to go to Allegheny, maybe you give your starters some rest. Maybe you start them, but they don't play the whole match. Maybe they play a half and then they come out in the second half. It's all about the preference of opponent that Waynesburg has. And if they don't have a preference, then I'd say play your starters. Let them get that muscle memory. Don't play the whole match, but play a little bit.
And even with those bench players that we talked about, one of the big bench players that we've seen come off and has even been starting a few rounds is Amanda Pepe. She's been coming in and out, and she just scored her 8th goal of the season, which the last person to do that as a freshman was Jules Moorbacher. And she's still on this team as a sophomore, continuing to do great. Exactly. She just did it last year. So we still have these bench players like Pepe and Delaney and Ward that are continuing to come in, fill in for all sides of this. So what is it with this depth of players on the bench that even if you're going to that position, you have that reliability? Is that going to be one of those things that they're going to rely on in the playoffs?
I think so, because with Waynesburg's depth in particular, it's created some flexibility about different positions, players going in different spots on the pitch here and there. You can get the flow of the match a little more. You can move a defender up to a forward in certain situations, certain sets, and things like that. And they've got a lot of flexibility, players that can go in the midfield and the defense, the midfield and forward, or play all 3 positions on the pitch outside of goalie, which they don't really need a goalie because Alexis Greenleaf has been spectacular. But the other 3 positions, defense, midfield, forward, they've got a lot of players that can play 2 or even all 3 of those. So the flexibility that they have in a lot of different players and that depth, that they're going to have to use a lot of that depth in the playoffs if they want to keep the success that they've got going. 4-1-2 in their last 7 PAC matches. They're in a great spot heading into the postseason.
Yeah, and one final question for you, Mike. You already mentioned first round of the playoffs coming up. It's either going to be Allegheny or St. Vincent. But for both of those teams, Waynesburg lost to St. Vincent 3-2, but tied to Allegheny 1-1. And that was a hard-fought game.
Yes.
They just barely tied to Allegheny in that game as well. And the St. Vincent game was a hard-fought game as well. So what are some key factors that need to change to succeed in this postseason for the women? Because either way, they're going to be facing an opponent that they haven't won against this year.
Well, I think those matches came a little earlier in the PAC schedule,
earlier, yeah.
and now that you're later in the season, you got the flow of it a little more. They're 4-1-2 in their last 7. I get one of those draws was against Allegheny, but that was the start of this 7-game stretch for the Waynesburg Yellow Jackets. They've got a little more continuity. They know more about the identity of their team. They know more about what they need to do to be successful and how they operate to be successful. Control the ball, take a little bit of pressure off Greenleaf's shoulders, and allow her to be great in certain moments, but don't force a lot of pressure on her. Take some of the pressure off her, allow her to sit back and relax a little bit and put pressure on other teams' defenses. That has been really the key to success for Waynesburg so far. Got to keep that up. If you keep that same formula going, I think they could beat either of these teams on the road. So I don't think they need to change anything from what they're doing now because they've already made the adjustments from those previous matches that resulted in the draw against Allegheny and the loss against St. Vincent.
Yeah, well, that's going to do it all for us here for the men's and women's soccer segment, and that's going to do it all for us here on JSW. Make sure to stay tuned on YouTube, on WCTV's YouTube page for more JSW content and Waynesburg content. Jack it up, everybody.
This has been a production of Waynesburg Community Television.